How successful were they and what forms did resistance take?
The Europeans were generally successful in colonizing. All efforts to colonize, except for those for Thailand, worked, whether direct or indirect rule. Generally speaking, Europeans and foreigners controlled large industrial manufacturing, banking and trading, while the indigenous people worked in factories or family businesses. Also, many people still farmed the land. As lands were colonized, large cities filled with people wanting jobs were created. The Europeans got cheap labor for rubber and tea plantations and got a lot of money because almost all profits went to the mother country.
So let's talk about specific successes.
Malacca was colonized in 1511, the Philippines in 1521, the East Indies in 1670, Timor in 1566, Indonesia in the early 1600s, Malaya in 1786, Singapore in 1819, and Burma in 1826. Vietnam was colonized in 1859, Cambodia in 1863, Sarawak in 1888, Brunei in 1888, North Borneo in 1888, and Laos in 1893.
The Dutch set up successful teams of growers of rubber trees, palm trees, coffee, tea, and spices in cities like Borneo and Sumatra. This created a bigger export market and a new entrepreneurial class. Singapore was founded by Stamford Raffles. This allowed the Europeans to get to China and other places they traded with easily because they gained access to the Strait of Malacca. Singapore turned from a pirate lair to a commercial seaport filled with merchant, laborers, and craftsmen from many different countries.
Obviously, some people in the colonized places were not happy with the new turn of events, so people attempted to push back.
Generally, resistance came in three different forms. Form 1. Immediate followers of ex-princes, ministers, and priests rallied together and attempted to fight off the colonial encroachment. Educated elites, using their European education, created programs in an effort to create social change. Typically, these programs created the culture for social change, yet did very little due to an inability to connect with rural populations, which is where a majority of population resided.
Form 3 was where younger educated students and activists, instead of wanting social change, wanted complete independence from the imperialists coming into their country. These people were able to bridge the gap between rural and urban areas, therefore making this effort more successful. The Philippines were made an international commercial seaport. However, education led to resistance by unemployed intellectuals and student protesters.
In the Philippines, under the leadership of Emilio Aguinaldo, guerrilla forces fought against American and Spanish forces in order to establish independence, but they failed. A guerrilla is a member of a small independent group taking part in irregular fighting, typically against larger regular forces.
In Burma, there was internal resistance by the monarch, so the British eventually took it over. But there were commercially active cities such as Rangoon that were very successful.
The Vietnamese authorities saw Christianity as a threat to Confucianism. Later, the French conducted a semi-successful naval attack. However, eventually they forced the Nguyen dynasty to give them the Mekong River territory.
In Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos, educating elites led to unemployed, frustrated intellectuals, and one university in Hanoi closed. But in the end, those three regions formed the Indo-Chinese Union.
Thailand was the only Southeast Asian country that managed to escape European colonizing. The two kings of Thailand kept internal stability, and they introduced European learning into the country. Thailand also served as a buffer state between British and French colonies.
Generally, sanitation and medical treatment improved, and the rate of infant mortality decreased. Cities such as Rangoon and Saigon developed because people had trouble finding a job in the countryside. However, many discovered seasonal employment and did not revert to city life.
Eventually, Europeans took over almost all of Southeast Asia. Most of the effects were negative because the Europeans exploited the resources and cheap labor for only themselves.
Free created using Powtoon.